This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, can you see my screen still?
Yes.
Okay. Hold on a second. Well, thank you everyone for attending this webinar. And today we're going to talk about beyond cost cutting, proving the value of your PMO. So the discussion will be around how can you make your PMO more likable and you show the value that the PMO has for your organization. Today we have well-known, hold on a second. So we have Andrew Ball. He's from UK. He's a well-known PMO leader. Andrew has over 20 years of experience in this field, driving excellence and strategic alignments in project management for organizations. Andrew has discovered that in order to increase the performance of the team, and he had been doing great jobs for many years in marrying project success with the broader business transformations. He also is renowned for actionable insights that catalyze changes in organization, optimize best practices, and scale business growth. Also, as a global team orchestrator, he's adept at steering pivotal change from strategic inception to execution. So I was thinking about all the credentials and experience that Andrew has, and then I play around a little bit with ChatGPT that has an application that allow me to create this drawing kind of picture. So this is Andrew with everything that he has, that he accumulated. He has been leading global teams in many organizations, and he's a master's in finance. So he will tell us a lot about that. So with that being said, Andrew, if you wanna say something about your experience, how you've been doing in PMO for many years.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure seeing you all. So I have been involved with PMO for around about coming up for 25 years, but to be honest, I think PMO is something you always do from the very, very beginning. You know, it's about supporting projects which run through everyone's life. I did 15 years in the British Army in the finance and the people side of it, so not the roughy toughy stuff. Not that I disliked it; it was just easier to sit in a nice warm office. I came out in around about 95 and got into projects. And the one thing I very quickly realised was that though I'm technically capable, I'm more interested in the people side of projects. It's about getting the team. It's about that successful delivery. It's about having everyone facing in the right direction and driving towards a successful delivery of the customer requirements and benefits. I have worked across many different sectors, from financial services to construction to utilities to railways to FMCG. So, and I think what is absolutely fundamental is a PMO is a PMO is a PMO. It's the organisation that is unique, and the PMO generally fits into that culture and that model. And that's something I'm very, very keen to follow. I've come across too many PMOs in my time and adopted them or helped them, supported them. And what has happened is that someone thought it was a good idea, and they put in a group of people, and those people sort of got lost. They're either chasing the wrong rainbow and trying to impose things that didn't fit in with the culture, or they just ended up being reactive to the needs of the business. And my project organisation is something I absolutely believe in. The PMO is an integral part, sitting alongside the project managers, the designers, the technical, the infrastructure people, the sponsors. It's about a team effort to actually achieve what the customer requires, which is absolutely important. And so working around those things, developing the people, getting the culture and the concept of delivery right actually takes the business a long way towards achieving their ambitions. And that's about it. That's about me.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you. We are privileged to have you here today and talking about and sharing your experience with the audience. So I'm gonna move to the first question that I have for you is to write the discussions around it.
Cool. Yeah. Do you want to move on the deck?
Yeah. So can you still see my screen?
I can.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think that I switched to another application. So the focus area will be on expanding the PMO perspective. So we're gonna talk a little bit about strategies for demonstrating value. And basically, Andrew, he's gonna be sharing his experience in this arena. So to get started, I have a question around defining value beyond cost savings. And then I had a beautiful picture there. So the first question is, based on your experience, how should PMOs redefine value in terms that resonates with the organizational objectives beyond just cost cutting?
I think that's very, very relevant at the moment. I think everyone is looking to cut costs. And so the PMO, as I mentioned in my introduction, PMO is an integral part of the project organisation, and it's absolutely key that you develop the single team, the single culture and approach to delivery. PMOs are not just a secretariat. They're not about just either holding project managers to account. They're there to actually help and support, and if necessary, help the project manager knock down blockers to actually achieve it. They bring a different dimension to project delivery, which is absolutely critical, beyond the bricks and mortar or the bits and the bytes. They actually bring the people side of it. And when you introduce then the change management perspective, it's about ensuring that adoption is actually driven forward. So from the value perspective, it's understanding what the business ethos is, what it is they're trying to achieve, and how the project world fits in to the project piece, and working through that. From the organizational objectives, I always look back to my early days in PMO, and it's understanding what the problem statement was when someone thought that a PMO was the solution. So it's about understanding what the problems that the PMO is there to resolve, and making sure that you focus and you achieve those. And it really is, it's getting in the heart of the business and the people, and actually driving that forward, driving that change and that adoption through. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so exactly. So that's we focus a lot on the topics of cutting costs in the PMO, but there are other things that we need to consider, because sometimes it's not easy for us to show the financial aspects of this type of organization.
From a very, very simple perspective, and Tony and I spoke about this, it's about the project failures. You know, why do projects not succeed? And there are two ways to look at it. You know, if a PMO gets very little acknowledgement in successful projects, but they almost become quite culpable with failures. So it's a matter of, if no one else will do any analysis, and this is beyond the lessons learned perspective, but it's actually looking at why projects do fail. Because there is an enormous, I've got some statistics around project failure, and it really is quite staggering. the sort of numbers that you look at are wasted effort. And it's the PMO, it's almost, no one else, as I say, no one else is going to actually look at the reason why projects don't succeed. But if the PMO sort of analyses it and can improve on those particular areas, all of a sudden, that wasted money, that wasted effort, that wasted funding, all of a sudden takes on a different dimension. And then from pure, I was going to say pounds, shillings and pence, but it's not, it's dollars and cents. You know, it becomes more and more valuable that if you can avoid it in the future by looking, reflecting on the past, you are actually going to achieve a lot.
Right. So
Samuel?
Yeah, thank you. Let me reshare my screen because I was doing something different. So I'm gonna show the entire screen. I was sharing just the application, but apparently it got frozen.
I've got you both twice now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
better.
Now, yeah. So moving forward, so I have like 10 questions. Let's see if we can go over all of those. The next question is around ownership and proactive delivery. And the question is, in your view, how can PMOs transition from a supporting role to a driving force within organizations, ensuring proactive rather than reactive project management?
I mean, this is a good one, and it's something I'm focusing on at the moment. It comes back to the portfolio approach. I have a couple of beliefs around project management that a business should really only be doing projects that evolve the operation, that take the business on to the next generation, whatever it is. And that's all part of the strategic planning. And as I said in my introduction as well about the project organization, once upon a time, the PMO used to be, and I've adopted a number of these, a group of people who sit in the corner that no one actually knows what they do. My PMO is really runs the project organization. The project organization is the project managers, it's the BAs, the infrastructure, all people involved with the delivery of projects sit within the project organization, and we're one business unit. In inverted commas. And when you go back to the portfolio piece, it's a matter of taking the strategic ambition and vision of the executive business leaders and then defining that and rolling it down. And it sits within the portfolio approach. So this is where you are driving the change rather than what has happened in the past. And I've experienced it far too often is that someone comes up with an idea, they get they quickly rush together a business case, it goes through, it gets approved, and they kick the project off without actually a great deal of forethought about where it sits within the strategic plan. And the one thing I always predict when I talk to the executives about this is in about 6 months' time, quite miraculously, a brick wall emerges and the project goes crashing straight into it because there are so many different external influences and pressures on project delivery that you can't actually knock them all out of the way. And from a project organization, from a portfolio perspective, you can actually start driving this change through in a disciplined manner, kicking things off when it is appropriate, when you have the resources available, when you have the business need appropriate, and just driving through. And it really is, it's that end-to-end, the strategic business plan, identification through to delivery and the benefits realization, which lead to the evolution of the business.
Yeah, the challenge that I think that also the people have is the how I am on the top of everything in the organization to be reactive, and the C-suite, they see that the PMO is actually adding value in everything they do. Yeah. So that's one of the challenges, how you do that. So,
well, it's about I mean, what I was saying about project delivery, I mean, it really is quite fascinating. You know, that you end up with a term which is pet projects. But my view is that there really shouldn't be any projects in an organization that don't actually sit outside the strategic plan. That's the only thing the business is doing, is moving it forward. If you have, just to contradict myself, and this is part of the challenge, certainly in the UK, is that we have sitting in the IT world, the CIO world, that there will be projects that keep the lights on. And that's really is all covered by its own governance model within the IT department. You know, are they projects? They're certainly not strategic because they are just really keeping the lights on. And so if you keep everything within the strategic world, it really is, it's about delivering the executives, the C-suite's plans and future ambitions for the organization. So they have got a lot of involvement in it from a sponsorship perspective through to just realizing the benefits. So it's about supporting them, providing them with the visibility, but it goes back to the full PMO end-to-end life cycle of the strategic plan from the inception all the way through to the benefits realization. The PMO, the normal PMO project delivery piece sits in the middle. It's a third phase, the middle phase of 3, really, and it's what we do. It's our bread and butter stuff. It's about the governance, and it's about the visibility, dealing with the risks, dealing with the finances, the demand, and all the other activities.
Yeah, definitely. Let me move on to another question. This one is related to value-added strategies. And the question is, what are the key strategies PMOs should employ to demonstrate the value in areas like process improvement, innovation, strategy alignment? So there's a lot of conversation around those topics in modern world.
Yeah, I mean, if the strategic alignment piece is very much around the business development, the business strategic plan, very, very key, making sure that the only projects that are in on the schedule are actually achieving or adding value to the strategic or achieving the strategic plan. The innovation and the process improvement piece, that it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that they are doing the best that they possibly can. You know, one of a couple of the cliches that I throw around far too often with my teams is all about doing better, not doing more. You know, so it's improving the way we do things, whether it's engagement with our customers, whether it's engagement with our project managers, whether it's engagement with the sponsors or the C-suite. It's about doing it better, not doing it more. So looking at how we can improve it. From a process perspective, I'm very much of simple project management. I believe that project management was developed many, many, many centuries ago to actually simplify the complex. You know, I look back, the one I normally quote is the building of the pyramids. You know, they certainly didn't have a formal project management process, but they knew exactly what to do by breaking down the component parts, the activities into the simple terms. You know, whether it is finding a 20-ton block of granite or sandstone 100 miles away, how do we get it there? And it was all project management. And I maintain that exact same ethos through today. I've noticed that there's a lot of gimmicks coming into project delivery, into PMO, which I think just reverses the simplicity. All it's doing is adding complexity, and I think it needs to be stripped out just to get back to basics.
Yeah. So, what role do you think the PMO play with everything related to agilities in organizations? Everyone is thinking about agile. So agile is the panacea to resolve all the problems and move the organization forward.
Agile has a place, and it was developed. Correct me if I'm wrong. In the software development world, and it's absolutely perfectly suited for that. In as much as when I was younger, or not that long ago, I used to build access databases, whether it's for a risk register or a project register in the PMO. I used to do it on an iterative basis. You know, in my mind, I had an idea of what I want. I developed a bit. Was that right? And I think from that perspective, from software development, from system development, it's absolutely perfect. What worries me is when they try to apply agile against a business change. Now, I'm not saying that waterfall or any other methodology is perfect, but when people are involved, you can't really do a lot of stuff on an iterative basis. You know, it is the full story, it's no story. So I see going back to what I was saying about the strategic business plan, there are a lot of elements within it. The majority of it will be business change, but there will be technical systems that actually come into that and will be delivered. Perfect for Agile. It provides the simplicity, the approach that is appropriate to the system development. But once we get into the user adoption piece, that has to be business change. That's all about the people side of things. And from a PMO perspective, you can balance the two quite simply within a simple project program approach.
Yeah, thank you. So if anyone has some question for Andrew, please put in the chat box. So we work on that. This question is related to measuring impact beyond cost, basically the title of the webinar. So the question is, what metrics or indicators do you suggest PMOs use to measure and communicate their value-added impact to organizational leaders beyond the traditional cost metrics?
I think it goes back to keep it simple. I rely I base everything around the three constraints, but fundamentally it's all about the plan. What are you planning to do? When are you planning to do it? And as simple, when's it going to be complete? From a reporting perspective, I get my project managers. It's what are you planning to do? What did you plan to do this week? What did you achieve and what didn't you achieve, and when you're going to achieve it? So you go through those simple mechanisms. Keep it as simple as possible. The more complexity you introduce into it, the harder it becomes to understand. And the lesson I learned very early on about the C-suite is they don't actually have time to read the detail. What they want is the headlines. And I learned this very simply when someone was talking about finances in a fairly major program, and we were looking at around about 85 million. What the sponsor was interested in is there enough money for us to complete? And that was it. And the simple metric or the simple picture I produced was the church spire or the church bell or the church clock thermometer that goes in UK on the outside. It's about fundraising. It's going to cost this much, 85 million. How far are we through? How much have we spent? Because the last thing that C-suite executives like to do is to have to go back to the board and ask for more money when it's desperate. So it's about presenting them with the simple picture so they can gather the real headlines and react if necessary. So from a finance perspective, you keep it that. If we're looking at progress, let's just be honest. We know what we have to achieve. That's what the plan says. That's what we've signed off. Where are we along that life cycle? I mean, you can throw in the S-curve. It works, but it's more money. It's that level of complexity that I think almost detracts the simple story that we're trying to achieve.
Right.
And I think it really is. I always look at it from the audience perspective. If you're reporting to the C-suite, it has to be the headlines. If you are reporting to the users, they're more interested in what's happening and what's going to affect them directly. And just keep it between those two limits.
Yeah. So the focus should be in the outcome. Sometimes we focus too much on numbers, but what really the outcome? So are we reaching the market penetration that we're looking for? Are we reaching the revenue that we're looking for, or the social impact that we're looking for? So I think that it's more like just showing the end values or the projects or the aggregated end values or the project portfolio to organizations, because sometimes number doesn't mean anything. So
to give you an example, I worked on a program with BAA, the owners of Heathrow Airport and Gatwick in the UK. And my job was incredibly simple. I was tasked by the sponsor and the executive was that we don't get the monthly report until week 3. Of the month. And it's instantaneously out of date. And the reason is because the financial numbers take so long to churn through. And that's where the problem is, that what is the point in financial numbers that are 3 weeks late? You've actually burnt through potentially £250,000 in that time, but you don't know. So it almost becomes irrelevant. The important thing is you strip it back. What is the basic information that the audience need to be able to make the decisions that are expected of them, and how quickly can you get it through, rather than presenting them with 17 presentation slides, each covered with Excel spreadsheet extracts that are just a whole pile of numbers.
Right. Yeah.
It really is. It's keep it simple. We are the PMO is there as a conduit of information to allow decisions to be made.
Yeah. So this is another question, right, related more about your experience, some case study of PMO value addition. And the question will be, could you share an example where a PMO significantly contributed to an organizational success in a way that went beyond mere cost efficiency?
It is actually an incredibly simple one. I was invited into a global shipping organization in the east of UK. And the problem was that they had a portfolio and it had 170 things in flight. They didn't know what they all were. They knew where they came from, but didn't know what they all were, and they didn't know the purpose of them. And it was just, their approach was, it's a good idea, kick it off. But what they actually wanted to do was have far more control over it. So developing the portfolio piece, it was going through looking at each of the 170, looking at the ones that are adding value, and we got it down to 85. Then took it through a prioritization process, so we can turn around and say these are the must-dos, these are the could-do, should-dos, would-dos, and the ones at the bottom you can just ignore about those. And we got it down to, it was about 15 pieces that are must-dos. We lost a further 25, and the ones in the middle were just when we had time, when we had the inclination, we can actually crack on and do those. But what was happening in the past, and the real reason how they got to this situation was that someone would come up with an idea and the executive turn and say, yeah, I like that, get on and do it. Now, these weren't project managers, these were people with day jobs. And I'm sure what happens in the States is it happens in UK and elsewhere, is that one person comes up with an idea, they're likely to be a very good source of other ideas. And then what was happening was that these people, and we're looking at the heads of, so a fairly senior person, vice president sort of level, was ending up doing it on the side of their desk, on top of their day job. And they can only focus on so many things at once. So and there was one particular guy in the finance world who was trying to do his day job on top of 5 projects, or 5 projects on top of his day job. And what actually transpired was the bottom 3 just sort of evaporated. No one was shouting about them, and so they didn't happen. Now, he'd already spent several months running these up, so it was just wasted effort. So rather than it coming through and sitting in a world in the schedule, in the plan and the prioritization, these were just buried, complete and absolute, just forgotten about. It made his day because all of a sudden he didn't have this pressure demand on him. But from a business perspective, we could have done it so much better. We wouldn't have wasted that time, whatever, we would have thought about it more. And so it was about driving through that change, that they all appreciated it. From the executive level all the way down, all of a sudden there was that clarity. And the cost saving was more about the removal of wasted efforts, and a clear path ahead than what the outcome was with those 3 items.
Yeah, excellent. If somebody has any question, please feel free to do it. So the next question that I have, Andrew, is related to enhancing organizational capabilities. And the question is, how can PMOs actively contribute to enhancing the overall capabilities and competitive advantage of their organizations?
I mean,
Yeah.
this really goes back to the project organization again. You know, the PMO is really the center of knowledge. You know, it's the knowledge base for project delivery, and to a certain extent from the organization as well. You know, everyone has their across the entire organization, whatever it is, have their focus, you know, their achievements.
Yeah.
So what is absolutely vital is that the PMO has the ability to pull together all this knowledge, the capability, skills.
Excuse me, can you put a mute, please?
So, sort of like I got your response from the presentation. So
Okay, go ahead.
And so it's really about exploiting, or that's a harsh word, but taking full advantage of the knowledge and skills across the entire business, or from the PMO delivery perspective, because they've seen things grow within the organisation. It is beholden on the PMO to actually develop the resources to make sure that they're all capable of doing their jobs now and in the future. So succession planning, it's all about looking at where the business is going to go, making sure that we have the capability in-house, or if not desired, we can identify it externally and bring it in when necessary. But it's about developing that pool of people who are absolutely focused on the future of the business and the growth and help to achieve it.
Right. So one thing that I observe for many PMO leaders is that it's difficult for them to sit on those meetings, be part of those discussions. So what would you say to the PMO leaders? How can they do that so they step up and they have the opportunity to talk to those levels, and the C-suites see them as an organization that are going to contribute to the success of the organization? So that's the challenge that I see. So I ask them, so are you sitting in those meetings or those these discussions when the leaders, they are looking to the future organization? Say, no, my boss does, but I don't do it.
No, and I think that there are two sides of it. One of which is the project organisation. You know, rather than it just being a PMO, which let's be honest, it's a PMO lead and analysts or coordinators, and sadly they generally sit in a fairly administrative type role. And so it's, how do you develop the skills within the PMO? You know, the one thing that is common, if you look at risk management is one of the most underrated tools and activities that I've come across, where it's incredibly powerful. You know, if you ever have the privilege of sitting in an executive board meeting, you know, one thing that's always on the agenda is the risk register, and there is a very good reason. It may be corporate risk, but it's, in reality, it's not a lot different to that sits in a project, a PMO, or a project organisation risk register, maybe at a slightly different level, but the content is exactly the same. You know, what is likely to happen, what's the impact, what's the probability, and what we're going to do to avoid it if necessary. So one area PMO could actually develop is that governance, that compliance piece that sits within the risk world. You know, that you have the skills, you have the knowledge, and you're actually going to start building the confidence in the C-suite of your capability. The other side is the translation of their vision of where they want to take the business, where their plan is, their strategic plan. You know, that if we look at statistics, you know, transformations are incredibly bad at actually succeeding in what they're planning to do. What is the reason for that? There are a myriad of different excuses as to why they happen, from funding to poor sponsorship, from a lack of drive within the business, and that disjoin between what is desired at the top level and what is actually achievable at the user level. So it's how do you bring that together? And it's the PMO really should be the glue between all aspects of it, because if you see the PMO as almost a gateway to the future, whatever, that sounds very grandiose, but they are the people. The PMO should be the people that take the vision from the C-suite, from the executive, translate it into something, and make sure that the users, the people who are involved with it, are actually part of it and adopt it and carry it forward. So what happens in the UK, and my conversations with people about strategic planning, is they're notoriously poor. That they come up with the vision and their confidence or certainty that it's actually ever going to be achieved between you and me and the people on this call is fairly low, because there isn't the mechanism that sits behind it to actually drive it through. So the PMO is very, very central to actually achieving that vision translation through to realization, please.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good comment. We go to another question, and this is related to the PMOs in a strategic decision making. What role can PMOs play in strategic decision making to ensure the contributions are aligned with and directly add value to the organization's broader goals?
I think it's back to the strategic business planning piece. They are the guys, they are people who formulate it. The level 0s and level 1 objectives will come out of the executive board, out of the C-suite, and it's the PMO that take them through and ensure that they are translated into achievable objectives at level 2, at level 3, and at level 4, and then the PMO will own the delivery of all that activity through to successful realization of them. So really it's about grabbing hold of it, and it's back to this project organization and assigning project managers when they become available, ensuring that projects kick off, improving or increasing the consistency and certainty of delivery, which is absolutely key, so that when we have all the level 3s or the level 4s delivered, we have that confidence that the level 0, the top man's or the top person's vision is actually realistic and achieved.
Right. So one thing is, we talk about proactiveness, but how involved is the PMO in establishing also the strategic vision of the organization? Because it seems like we just are expecting that somebody else on the top leadership decide what this organization gonna do for the future, for the well-being of the organization, and we just expecting orders. So okay, now these are the projects, but I are no parts of those decisions. So if you don't sit you are not part of the C-suite, so you're gonna be seeing, as I see a lot of people, that they just waiting that something happen on the top so I can put some action there.
Well, it's about helping them. You start off. I mean, if I take you through the strategic planning activity, is that, so you have the level 0s or the level 1s. The level 1s I like to be owned by C-level organization directors, because it all sits within their responsible areas. From there, they get rolled down to their directors, their VPs, their heads of, who then build them up, and there's an assignment there, who then take away and think, okay, if we've got to achieve, I'll give you an example. I worked with a financial services organization a few years ago, and one of the strategic objectives was to rationalize the HR recruitment process. One of the challenges was that they had 37 recruiters on their preferred supplier list. So every time that someone in the business wanted to hire a new hire, they had to go out to 37 different recruiters, and it was hugely inefficient. So what happened was that the level one objective was we rationalize the recruitment. It's all we rationalize HR. So the level two out of that would be we rationalize, we look at, we streamline the recruitment process. And then within the HR function department, they would turn around and say, what are the activities that we need to do to rationalize the recruitment process? So at the lower level, the people supported by the PMO are actually coming up with the activity, which when it's all rolled back up again, achieves the overall vision. PMO are supporting that, PMO are driving that through, because at that point you then end up with a full suite, a big list of all the activity that comprise the strategic business plan. So the PMO are owning that, they're scheduling it, prioritizing that, and they are the ones who are assigning the resources through a number of other different mechanisms and actually scheduling when these projects are going to be delivered, so that you're not ending up with the inevitable sprint into the brick wall. So it's about helping and supporting at the same time, keeping an eye on that strategic plan for the achievements. And the visibility up, you know, there are a number of things that are coming out of it. You know, if we take it back to the level zero and what I was saying about executives they come up with a vision, it goes to the shareholders, it goes to the market, you know, and all of a sudden they say, yes, that's absolutely brilliant. There's a great deal of interest. There may be some share movement in that, but all of a sudden it's over the years, over the time, it's never doesn't quite materialize, or it changes, or it flavor. What this process does is it actually increases the level of certainty over the achievement. So shareholders get greater confidence that you're actually going to achieve it. The C-suite are absolutely bowled over because they know that their vision of the future of the business actually is coming to fruition, and it's just going to drive it through. And it's that mechanism that the PMO is at the heart of, because it's about the control, the governance, and the structure of the delivery of that strategic business plan.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. So let me move to another question. So we're gonna have two more questions to end. So leveraging lessons learned from organizational growth. How can PMOs utilize lessons learned not just as a project closeout activity, but as a strategic tool for driving organizational improvement and growth?
Lessons learned, similar to the risk register, it is so commonly overlooked. It's not just navel gazing at how well the project went or it didn't go, or looking for the people to blame. It's about, there are so many different aspects of it. So the one thing I do is, yes, you have to go through that, take step by step through the life cycle of the project, understand what went well, what didn't go well, and you celebrate the good stuff. And the reflection on the stuff that you could have done better, whether it identifies a training need. Are we as a business poor at estimating, whether that's finances or whether that's duration against a plan? But all of a sudden you can build it up. The other side of it is that all of a sudden it identifies risks, standard risks, whether they're corporate or whether they're project. You know, if all of a sudden the project was 6 months late, what was the reason for it? You know, and this is where it really comes out. So next time you go into a project, it's not about, it's the risk is that whatever we estimate, it may not quite be as, and so you're building this collateral, this knowledge, this center of excellence up from what we've done before. Far too often what I've come across is you close the program. Part of the close down process is you have these lesson learned sessions. People come in and they're incredibly defensive. They don't see it as a great win to anyone. They go through, they have the conversation, they have the interviews, they do all the detail, they document it, it gets filed away, and it's forgotten about, where you actually need to fill it back into the project delivery process, because it identifies where we are good, it identifies where we're not so good, it identifies people's strengths, so you can actually, from an HR perspective, it can become part of their PDP. You know, so all of a sudden we're looking at developing the people as well, rather than just this, we closed the project, what did we do? What did we do well? What did we not do too well? And so it's fascinating from that perspective that you continually use it as a source of information in a fairly people-oriented way. Richard, your hand keeps going up. If you want to ask a question.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you and complimenting
That's good.
complimenting you on some of the things that are constantly overlooked and some of the things that need to be focused on. So I'm just applauding you. It wasn't my hand for a question.
No, it's good. I mean, it is. It's one of those that at the end of the project, there are a couple of things, you know, at the end of the project, the one thing I like to do from a project organization perspective is get the project manager back onto the next project. You know, the day that they're sat around doing nothing is the day they're costing the business money. So it's not about overutilizing them, but it's about utilizing them as best you can. So when you bring them back into that lessons learned, it's very simple for it to become a bit of a bun fight. You know, people don't want to walk out embarrassed and with a bloody nose, but it's not. You've got to picture, you've got to see it as incredibly positive, because they're good. You know, celebrate the good things.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Just to end these discussions or this webinar. So I'm gonna end it off with another question. So you advise the PMO leaders are out there. So one thing that for me is like trend and is also worry, because I probably is in the last when I was in the PMI Global Summit. So I came across with different people. So they used to be PMO directors or PMO managers. All of a sudden, the organization, they decided to shut down those PMOs. But it's not one, it's not two. There are many people that are talking to them. So what happened? So apparently, the only one that think that add value to the organization is us. So there's misalignment or misunderstanding, or we don't know how to sell the concepts of PMO in organization that we are losing, because not long ago, I talked to someone from California, 20 people lost their job because they decided we don't need a PMO. We are successful with a PMO, but they have 8 years with a PMO. So what do you suggest, advise those leaders that still are on the company, so they don't have the same thing? Because that, for me, is a trend, because the economy is tough everywhere in the world. So when it's all tough, the organization starts thinking about, I need to cut costs. And the weakest is the PMO, because they cut him from there. So what do you suggest?
And I have to apologise to you, Tony. I had a podcast in UK, and that question came up, and I actually quoted the example of California. And it's not sadly, it's not a surprise. But what my response at that point is exactly the same now, and it is, at some point, someone in the organisation had a problem, and the solution was a PMO. And they would have built a business case, whenever that was. Now, that could have been 25 years ago. That could have been 10 years ago. It could have been 5 years ago. So the first thing you have to do is actually understand why the PMO was set up. And you have to understand what that problem statement is. You then have to look at what has changed between then and now and understand what it is that you're not doing. You know, whether, and you, the one thing I mentioned at this other podcast was one of the challenges with PMO is they become complacent. And they do end up, they become too comfortable doing what they do. And the one thing you do, if you sit around doing that, you become an easy target. PMOs can be seen as a massive overhead. In the early days, in generation 1 of PMO, if you had a word with a project manager, they turn around and say, "You're completely out a waste of time, you're costing me money, and you're coming out of my budget. You are making my life difficult." We overcame that by all of a sudden adding value. Mm-hmm. I think my comments about the complexity is a consequence of that, because people just saw the way out of that challenge was to add different layers on top of what you're currently doing. But as I said at the very beginning, it was what we actually, the culture, the mindset we have to get to is we have to do things better. We don't do them more. So how do we improve it? What I'm very, very keen on is the next generation. Throughout my 20 plus years in the PMO, I have never, ever come across anyone that went through in UK primary school, in US probably high school, who came out with a statement, "When I grow up, I want to be a PMO." We all got into PMO from a whole host of different routes, right, different reasons. And it doesn't matter what it is. But what is important is it's almost beholden on us to actually develop the next generation. And how do we do it? It's about mentoring. It's about bringing on the youngsters, seeing the beauty and the value of the PMO. Because all of a sudden, if you're doing that, it's going to answer your question. What is the PMO here to do? And it's here to make projects deliver successfully in whatever shape or form. How do you do that? You make sure you've got the right people in the right seats at the right time with the right skills to actually achieve it. One thing that I focus on, another thing I focus on is sponsors. In the UK, we are notoriously poor at having strong sponsors, project sponsors. Now, the sponsor in my mind is the most important person in the project. They are the people that take it to the business. They are the people that sit down with the executive and actually have those arguments, those discussions, those debates over the rights and wrongs of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And if they need more money, it's not the project manager, it's the sponsor. If you have a weak sponsor who is just a sponsor because they couldn't run away fast enough, you're not actually going to get their support. So the PMO is almost responsible for ensuring that sponsors know what their roles and responsibilities are, and they can do it because it pays dividends in the long run. From a project management perspective, it's about having the right people and having the right culture and the right mentality to actually succeed. It's not about beating people up. It's about managing and controlling and helping people achieve what it is that they need to achieve. And you put all those things together and you should actually have a successful project. Back to Tony's question, it is, why did that particular CIO think that the PMO was an overhead? And that could come from anywhere. The numbers we're talking about, I think, Tony, were really quite staggering. But it really is, it's about understanding what it is that PMO is there to achieve. And if you're not achieving that, I mean, I prepared a whole pile of statistics, from I got off Google, and you look at the sort of numbers of failed projects. And the one I look at, so I apologize for these statistics because they came off Google, and it's incredibly difficult to get statistics around project delivery. But it's got 30% of transformation projects are successful, which means that 70% aren't. 27% of projects achieve their goals, which means that 73% don't. 56% of projects are aligned to business objectives, and that means 44% aren't. So if you have an annual budget of 20 million. That's round about 14 million that you are wasting.
Yeah.
And if that isn't a compelling argument for any CIO, I mean, if the person in California, if you ask the question, how many of your projects failed, and then work out how much that cost, and then you get the PMO to think, what would I have done different to save that money, to stop that project? And it could well be we didn't kick it off, or that we focused on planning, or we did a bit more work on resourcing and demand, or we looked at the risk a little closer. And at the end of the day, if that project had been successful and you had saved £5 million, all of a sudden the CIO would turn around and say, it's good value. So it really is look at how PMO is involved in project failure, not success failure, because that's the real measure. If you can actually stand there as a PMO leader and say, none of my projects fail, it means you are doing a good job.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, on that point, you know, that's where the argument is really, really valid. Because otherwise, you know, we are actually an easy target if all we do is weekly reports and chair governance meetings.
That is right. So anybody have a question for Andrew before we close out? No. Well, Andrew, I really thank you for your time and your passion that you have about this topic. So we have been talking several times, so that we need to do something for the industry. So and now I don't know if things gonna change. The PMI acquire PMO Global Alliance. If the PMI gonna do something for the PMO professionals, but hopefully they do something different to create the awareness. That's one of the things that I think is important for corporations to create the awareness. So this type of organization is necessary for the well-being of the companies. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you everyone for attending.
Pleasure.
Sorry that we have a little bit of technical glitch with the LinkedIn live, so I needed to switch to Zoom. We made it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone.
Yeah. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
I'll catch you later. Cheers, Tony.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye.